At this point, we already know that the Ball Lightning Sorcerer is the most powerful build on Season 2 of Diablo 4. However, most of the builds I see online are tailored towards a playstyle that doesn't really suit my own, with the style focusing on timing your teleport attack to avoid those crazy one-hit kills and stun your enemies. Today, I'll be going over my version of this build with no teleport, and instead focusing on tanking all incoming damage and dealing as much damage as possible quickly. This is a great build for anyone who likes playing a more stress-free version of the game, as you really only have to hold down your basic attack button while occasionally pressing others. So a lot of the work is done passively. Now I'm level 80 at the moment, but I will go over what additions I think are most important when working up to level 100. This is a very simple guide that will go over the skill tree, most important aspects, some of the Paragon Board, and how you should go about playing with this build. I try to keep any guides I do as short and filler free as possible so you can get back into your game quickly. No 45-minute build guides here. We'll get straight into what I think is important. What I do want to mention though is this build was tailored based on what I found to be weak points while progressing. Use this build guide as a general guideline, as part of the fun of this game is customizing what works best for you. This is really a good starting point, and honestly any half decent build focusing on Ball Lightning is gonna slap, so you don't need to stress about every little detail. If you like what you see here, be sure to subscribe to the channel for all things gaming, and without further ado, here is the guide. For the skill tree, we're going to start off with 5 points into Arc Lash. You'll also want to grab Enhanced Arc Lash and Flickering Arc Lash, as movement speed is very important to us, which you'll see later. In the next section here, we are grabbing absolutely nothing. Now there are some good passives in this section, so if you find yourself always short on mana, you can always move things around accordingly, and maybe grab the Devastation passive, but personally I didn't experience a need for it. Now in the defensive section, we are going with Fire and Ice. We're going to start with Frost Nova. It's an absolute must for your crowd control, so we're going to put 5 points into that. And we want the added vulnerable damage here, so we're going to grab Enhanced Frost Nova and Mystical Frost Nova. Now while you're in this defensive section, you will also want to grab Flame Shield, as this will act as sort of your panic button if you ever find yourself in a tough spot, temporarily making you invincible. We are only putting 1 point into this as we don't actually need any damage output from it, but we will grab Enhanced Flame Shield and Shimmering Flame Shield, as again, movement speed is a focus of ours, and the healing 50% of your missing life is a nice bonus. Now here I also dropped 3 points into the Elemental Attunement passive, as the extra cooldown of these defensive skills can really come in handy, and like the movement speed, you will see that lucky hits are important with this build as we go on. Now in the next section, I put 5 points into Lightning Spear. The damage increase with each point isn't that significant on its own, but when we pair it with the Conjuration Mastery passive, it makes a big difference. I did also grab Enhanced and Invoked Lightning Spear while I was here. Theoretically, the invoked or summoned Lightning Spear would suffice for this build, so choose what you prefer. In this Conjuration section, we also maxed out Precision Magic to increase those lucky hits, and Conjuration Mastery as previously mentioned. Now onto our Mastery skills section, we have what is probably the most broken attack on the game when paired with the right aspect, and that is Ball Lightning.
Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
We're going to max it out, and we're going to grab Enhance and Wizards, as we want that crackling energy to just add to our passive damage output. And that's why we'll max out Static Discharge and put 2 points into Invigorating Conduit. Now again, if you find mana to be an issue, you can try to play around and get the extra point for this passive. However, I think 2 points is sufficient. Of course, our ultimate will be Unstable Currents, which will make you game-breakingly strong while it's active. In this section, we will also max out Coursing Currents, Electrocution, and Conduction, just to enhance those critical hits and movement speed. Our key passive will be Overflowing Energy, and for your enchantments, you will want to grab Ball Lightning and Frost Nova. And with that, our skill tree is complete. Now I'm going to touch on the aspects that are crucial to this build, and then we'll go over the ones that I've added but are not quite as important. Of course, the most important is Ball Lightning orbiting around you. This is a pretty easy aspect to find on legendaries, but you're going to want to imprint the one that has the most damage possible. Mine has a 24% damage buff, but whatever percentage you can find will work, as it really is the orbiting effect around you that is the most important. Now I really like Frost Nova, not only for its freezing crowd control ability, but also for its ability to make vulnerable enemies. So I believe the aspect that grants you a second Frost Nova with the caveat of an increased cooldown time is well worth it. Since we don't have teleport to get you in and out of battle quickly, you will need an aspect that heals you as much as possible while you are close to enemies. Mine here grants you 70 health per second. Now there is a unique that is really important when tying this build together, and that's Esu's Heirloom, as of course here we get that critical hit to movement speed buff. Now if you don't have this unique, it's totally okay, as it was a pretty recent addition to my build, but what I do recommend in that case is going back to your skill tree and maybe swapping out some of those movement speed buffs, as they won't be as important to you. The less important aspects I have here are the basic skills granting damage reduction just to make you a bit more tanky, basic skills increasing my attack speed, and Lightning Spear having a chance to spawn additional Lightning Spear, but feel free to swap those ones out if you find you prefer others. I also am wearing a few other uniques here. I have the Fists of Fate, Iceheart Braze, and Mother's Embrace uniques, but none of those are mandatory. Now, gems play a very important part in this build. Our goal here is to be able to tank as much damage as possible, therefore we will want to increase our health by adding a ruby into every piece of armor we can. We're also going to add whatever elemental resistance gems you can to get as close as possible to that 70% cap on your 3 pieces of jewelry. Keep that 70% resistance cap in mind when going through your Paragon board, as it's really easy to accidentally overdo your resistance to lightning. And I added a sapphire and an emerald into my 2 weapons to buff up that critical damage. Yes, crit and vulnerable were nerfed a bit from season 1, but they are still incredibly important. For the Vampiric Powers, I didn't do anything fancy, and I kind of used what most people use with their Ball Lightning builds. The ones that I think are most important are Undying to constantly heal you, Anticipation as our ultimate is incredible with this build, Hectic as we want to be able to decrease cooldown time whenever possible, and Moonrise for the damage buff. I also use Ravenous, but I feel this is the least important of the 5, so feel free to swap it out if you really like another one, especially if you don't have that Esu's Heirloom unique. Now, my Paragon board is incredibly basic, and it focuses on simple principles and avoiding hitting resistance caps more than anything else. We're going to grab the Ceaseless Conduit and the Static Surge board attachments. Positioning doesn't really matter here, and for the 3rd attachment, my plan is to grab either the Elemental Summoner or the Enchantment Master when that time comes. Now, what I like to do is I try to grab every magic, rare, and legendary node I can, all the way up until the Static Surge board, where at this point we don't really grab any of the magic nodes that increase your damage to stunned enemies, as we're not using teleport in this variation of the build. For my glyphs, I have Charged and Electrocute currently, but there are a lot of great options depending on what you feel might be lacking when you play. Here are a few screenshots of my board to give you some ideas. So that's it for the build itself. Now for the playstyle, it really is quite simple, and it's why I enjoy this build so much. What you typically want to do is charge directly into battle and use Frost Nova in conjunction with your ultimate if it's ready. You're going to hold down your basic attack and press Ball Lightning and Lightning Spear as soon as either of them are available. The most important thing to remember while doing this is keep a close eye on your health bar. Attacks from enemies even up to 10 levels higher than you should not be able to take you out in one hit due to our strong focus on health and tanking all the damage. However, if you are fighting a boss that you are heavily under leveled for, or if you happen to be in PvP, that panic button and second Frost Nova will be an absolute lifesaver. As an example of what this build is capable of, here's me absolutely annihilating Varshan at level 80, and the results were quite similar when fighting Lord Zir. I'm completely confident that this build will be viable all the way up until level 100 as long as you pay attention to your stats, and as long as Blizzard doesn't decide to absolutely nerf it. I also want to mention that you're seeing some footage of my girlfriend's Twisting Blades rogue build in the background. I don't normally do build guides, but I did get a lot of requests for this one on my last Diablo video, and if you did enjoy it and you want to see a video on that Twisting Blades rogue, let me know down in the comments below and I'll be happy to make one for that as well. So I hope this video helped you build your ultimate sorcerer. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if it did, and as always, take care guys, and I'll see you in the next one.